So this is part 3 of cognition, and observational learning is very simple, unlike the other two. There's a lot of meat, a lot of substance with the other two types of learning. So observational learning, what is this? Monkey see, monkey do, and this is basically modeling. So we use this a lot for learning. So think about this. This is an example that I use. So the first time you got behind the wheel of a car, you kind of knew what you were doing. Why? Well, because you've been modeling this, or you've been observing this, right? So then you can model it. It's like you've been observing your caregivers drive, or whoever, friends, and so when you get behind the wheel, you kind of know what to do. Tying shoes, buttoning up shirts, all those kind of fine motor skills that we talked about in chapter 12, a lot of times are learned by observation. So observational learning can be very, very helpful. Now, especially when it's like a manual task, now can be unhelpful. So you could be modeling as a caregiver or sibling, an older sibling, some bad behavior, right? So with spanking, for instance, this could model aggression. Violent movie, TV shows, playing violent video games can model aggression, and that could be a problem. So Albert Bandura, a long time ago, created a study with what's called a bobo doll. It's like this inflatable doll. It usually looks like a clown, has sand on the bottom. You hit it, it bounces back, that kind of thing. It's meant to be hit. So in one condition, they have the kids look at adults beating up the bobo doll. In the other condition, they have kids watching the adults being nice, gentle to the bobo doll, and see if there was a difference when the kids got in there and played with the bobo doll. Well, there was. The kids who watched the adults be aggressive to the bobo doll were much more aggressive than the kids who did not watch adults be aggressive to the bobo doll. So this was showing that modeling aggression can enhance aggression. So that's what that study was all about. And this was true for boys and girls. So yeah, that's about it for observational learning. That's all about how I have to say. So as good as bad parts, it's an important component for learning. All right, we're going to move on to chapter 7 material, which is on memory. So also certainly part of cognition. Now, the 3 phases of memory: encoding, storage, and retrieval. So encoding is like, imagine you have a box and you're walking into a storage facility. So entering, think encoding, entering, both starting with the letters EN. So you got to enter into the storage closet. Okay. Step 2, storage. Where do you put it? Left side, right side, back, front, top shelf, bottom shelf, in the back of the shelf, in the front of the shelf. That's storage. Retrieval, you got to take it out of memory. So encoding, bringing the box into storage, the storage unit. Storage is where exactly you're going to put it, and then retrieval, you want to take it out one day. Okay. So those are the 3 phases in order. You need to know encoding, storage, retrieval, which is pretty easy. Now, when you forget something, doesn't necessarily mean it's gone from your brain. Not necessarily. We don't know, but it might still be in there. And we know that sometimes it is, because sometimes you're like, oh, I forgot, and then later on you remember. So it's like, just because you can't find something in your storage closet doesn't mean it's not there. Somebody stole it? Not necessarily. So it could be there, you just can't find it. Same thing with our memories. So it could be that it's stored in there and we just can't retrieve it. We don't have the right cue. Okay, so 3 major categories of memory. So we got sensory, short-term, and long-term. So think about it this way. Sensory memory is like your Snapchat. Not that I know anything about it, but Snapchat, from what I understand, so it's like something that, you get one picture, lasts for, I don't know, 30 seconds. Okay. So let's go with that anyway. Let's go with what I think Snapchat is. Okay. And, oh, and you can't save it. Okay. So, again, it may not be true, but let's just go with that. Now, long-term is your big photo album. So your big photo album with, your printed out pictures when you used to do that. I don't know if anybody really does that anymore, but that's long-term memory. Okay. So knowing that, what holds more information, more pictures? Well, obviously the photo album. So long-term memory holds more amount of information than on the opposite end of that continuum, sensory memory. Okay. What holds it for longer? Well, as I said, sensory memory is like Snapchat for just 30 seconds. It's held there. Long-term memory is the photo album, which could hold it for ever, I guess. So till the end of time. So for a very long time. So long-term memory, as the name implies, obviously, holds it for a long time, the longest. So long-term memory, the photo album, holds the most amount of information for the longest time. Sensory memory holds information for the least amount of time and holds the least amount of information. But there's an advantage that sensory memory has, and that is it holds the most detail. Think about it this way. What happens to the pictures in the photo album over time? They start to fade, right? The detail starts to fade. So the general rule is the longer you hold information in memory, the fewer details you remember. Like, you probably remember more about yesterday than 10 years ago, unless it's something maybe really traumatic. Although even that, it's like we think we remember a lot of things about a traumatic event, but do we actually really? We'll talk about that later. But with long-term memory, yeah, you hold stuff for longer, you probably remember less detail. And the more information you hold in your memory, the less detail you usually remember. Think about it this way. So if I gave you a study guide with one question on it, then you're probably going to remember that information in pretty good detail, right? But you only know the answer to one question. Now, if I give you 100 questions, you remember more information, but probably less detail about each thing, right? If I gave you a whole bunch of people to know, so 100 people, you're probably going to remember less detail about each person, right? So the general rule is the more information you have to remember and the longer you have to hold it in your memory, the less detail. So sensory memory, Snapchat, not much information, not for long, but high detail. Long-term memory, a lot of information, long time, not as much detail. Okay. All right. So sensory memory. So Snapchat, we already covered that. Real quick, echoic and iconic sensory memory. Those are two subtypes of sensory memory. Echoic, think echo, hearing. Iconic, eye, vision. So echoic memory is auditory sensory memory. Iconic sensory memory is visual sensory memory. Okay, so which one is faster? Which one lasts less time? I said both are very quick duration. Remember, this is the Snapchat. Sensory memory Snapchat goes away quickly. So which one do you think is faster? Well, here's another question to pose. What's faster, speed of light or speed of sound? Well, it's not even close. Speed of light. We can fly the speed of sound. We can fly way past the speed of sound, actually. But as far as I know, we cannot fly the speed of light. Much faster. So thunderstorm, you hear the thunder after the lightning, right? So lightning, you see it first. Speed of light's faster. So iconic memory is faster than echoic. Vision's a faster sense. Okay, so echoic for hearing, iconic for vision. Iconic is faster, speed of light faster than speed of sound. All right, next up, short-term memory. So this one's sandwiched in between sensory and long-term. So it's it holds more information than sensory, holds it for longer than sensory, but not as long as long-term and not as much as long-term. Doesn't have as much detail as sensory memory, but has more than long-term memory. So it's sandwiched in the middle there. So, by the way, sensory memory, we don't have to pay attention to it. It automatically goes into our sensory memory, effortlessly, subconsciously. Now, to go to short-term memory, we have to pay attention to it. Now, its capacity, we're going to say, is what's called 7 plus or minus 2, which, if you do the math, is 5 to 9 items. So it holds around 5 to 9 items, and for about half a minute, 30 seconds, we're going to say. Okay, so now there's something called working memory. So working memory is a lot like short-term memory, except it deals with multitasking. So it's like if I'm talking to somebody and trying to remember something at the same time. So I'm doing some type of task and trying to remember that information from something else. That's what working memory is. So it's more complex than short-term memory. Short-term memory by itself is just you're trying to remember something like a phone number. Okay. How can we improve short-term memory? Chunking. Well, what's a chunk of something? It's a group, right? So if we group items together, it can actually enhance our short-term memory. So we do this with numbers all the time, like phone numbers. So a phone number, if you have, in the US anyways, with the area code, we have 10 numbers, right? So 10 items, that's past the 5 to 9 range. So we got a problem. We're not going to remember that phone number. But if we group it into 3, 3, and 4, then really it's 3 items. If you think about it, it's like one number that's 3 digits, one number that's 3 digits, one number that's 4 digits. So that's below the 5 to 9 range, so we're good. So really, when we say 5 to 9 items is the capacity of short-term memory, really what we're saying is 5 to 9 chunks. Not 5 to 9 individual pieces of information, but 5 to 9 chunks. Okay, so social security number, same thing, credit card numbers, license plates. All right, that's chunking. Imagery, picture paints 1,000 words. If we can put the concepts in a picture, that helps a lot. Self-referencing effect, if we can relate the information to our own lives, this helps our short-term memory. So make it relevant to us. We care probably more about us than anything else. So that helps. Rehearsal, repetition, although you got to be careful with that. That can really screw you up because it's like the telephone game. You start rehearsing it wrong. So that can happen. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop it here, and then we're going to start with long-term memory next on part 4 of the videos.